When I'm bumming around the city, editing in coffee shops and running errands, I like bringing some type of camera along with me, but I always want something small enough to not get in the way of daily life or draw more attention to me. Additionally, obviously I have an affinity for film, but don't want to be wasting frames just for the sake of shooting something, which is where a half camera comes perfectly into play. A half camera uses half the negative size of a normal 35mm camera, allowing you to get twice as many exposures from 24 to 48 or 36 to 72 respectively. This gives me a better sense of just shooting whatever looks interesting and not really feeling guilty about potentially wasting frames and subsequently money as well. For the most part, the shots on this camera will mostly be used for social media or scouting locations and not really for serious work or obviously prints. So again, the lower resolution from the half frame is not really a problem for me. This is the perfect throw in your pocket or bring on a vacation and treat it like a disposable camera, especially with its 22mm lens. It's wide enough to capture just about any scene or portrait, but isn't too wide to start warping the photos and looking janky. The camera technically shoots diptychs, which is a quality of a half-frame camera, which is where there are two photos on a shared negative space together, which depending on the pairing of the photos can actually make it much more interesting than just one. But obviously sometimes the photos paired aren't great, so you might have to do a little cropping or changing out some of the photos, if that's your style. The camera is honestly really small, and it doesn't really offer much for control, just having a flash on and off toggle, which I will say it is super nice that it has a strong flash on it, because many of these little disposables or point and shoots have fixed aperture lens, which will mean you'll be wanting to use the flash frequently as to not underexpose your photos. Because it is a half frame camera, the default way to shoot and look through the viewfinder is portrait or vertical instead of the normal landscape orientation on most other cameras. Kind of a fun little difference and might even be preferred by some people because of it's already formatted to social media right off the bat. I've been using this camera for a couple months now, and my opinion, which wasn't super high, has changed quite a bit, so let's get into it. Overall, I think this camera is a cheap, informal, pocketable camera that makes twice as many 35mm exposures, and because of that is honestly in a really good spot for cameras, I think. It's fun to use and feels way less intimidating to people to both shoot and have their photo taken. One thing I've noticed as a photographer, that unless you're on set with a model or something, shooting photos of your friends, especially on a night out or something, with a big professional camera can be quite intimidating to, I think, most people who don't get their photo taken often. Whereas when you're using a small informal camera like this, or a disposable, or even like a 2000s Digicam camera, I think more people are inclined to jump in front of the camera, act goofy, want to shoot it, etc. Whereas I think the professional level of a professional camera is much more intimidating to anyone who doesn't use cameras, or even me. I mean, honestly, when I have a friend who's shooting photos, I would probably be less inclined to want to jump in front of a clinically sharp digital camera versus a more informal, fun film camera. As for using the camera, I have a couple recommendations that I think would help you out, as getting the most out of these fixed cameras can be a little tricky. Because it only shoots at 1/100th of a second at f9.5, the film that you choose is going to make a big difference. Either bright day and brighter indoors, or darker indoors and overcast. For a bright day, a 100 to 200 ISO film is going to be your best bet when shooting in darker shade or indoors, not in direct sunlight. You're going to want to make sure you have the flash on just for safe measure. On the other hand, on overcast days or more interior shooting, using a 400 or 800 speed film is going to have enough light sensitivity to render good results. Honestly, if you're trying to shoot in a wide variety of lighting conditions, I wouldn't expect all the photos to come out. I know for my frames, going from bright outdoor, really not super sunny, but snow lit scenes to indoor scenes, the camera struggled quite a bit because of its limited settings. So if you can, just shoot in one lighting condition, that'll make all the photos come out, or use the flash when you need to. My night suggestion would be, unless in bright daylight or direct sunlight, when you're taking a photo of anything, use the flash. Unless it's a photo of a cool light pattern or of shadows specifically, using the flash will render more consistent results with the camera, especially if you're shooting anything of people. My last suggestion is that I think anyone can find a use for this camera. Whether you be a digital photographer, adding this little fun behind the scenes film camera can give some nostalgic flair to your workflow, or for a kid wanting to get into film and photography, this helps them save frames and money. Or for someone with a more inconvenient lifestyle looking for an easy way to capture memories, I think this would be great as well. Like I said, for me, it's been great for just throwing my pocket or backpack or running errands or hiking and just snapping away. For 50 bucks, getting a reusable film camera that looks cool, can go anywhere with it, and take so many photos on film, I think it is really at a great price point. I think you can get some really interesting photos, especially when you're pairing two together that have some type of relationship to one another. My only gripe with the camera is that the photo counter on the top can make it difficult to see which number it's actually on, which when I was using it, I liked trying to actually create interesting, varied, meaningful diptychs that have some type of relation, which was a challenge because I would quickly lose count of which frame I was on, and through the photo counter on the top was pretty unsure of being able to tell which photo it was on.
Overall, I'm really satisfied with a handful of photos. The first being the biking photo and the highway sign photo. I feel like there's this somehow nostalgic coming of age notion of moving on or something that I take away from it that just feels, I don't know, really cool. Next are the Volvo photos. I think the sense of depth in both of these is what I like. On the left photo, we're looking through my 4Runner at the Volvo, and then in the right photo, we're seeing a reflection of like an overhead bridge in the back of the Volvo's reflection, which I think just makes the photos much more dynamic. And the last two that I like are the ones of Colin on the beach. They're just him in basically two different positions with almost an identical composition. This kind of reminds me of the early 2010s, like Tumblr era. I'm not really sure why. I think it's just like the Pacific Northwest looking scene with the more ambiguous, but clearly a person figure in the frame still. Outside of this camera, there are a lot of other really interesting half-frame cameras. The Sheikah Samurai is one of them that is ergonomically very interesting, but not something I'm sure I'd like that much. There's also the Olympus Pen, which seems pretty cool, and there's some new ones that are being made seemingly every couple months. I think having a more dedicated hard body camera would be nice for shooting this type of photos, but I think that this Kodak Ektar does really offer a good entry into half-frame cameras. I really think the photos that you make on them, especially when paired together, make a different workflow for photography. Even compared to normal film photography, composing two images that are trying to have some relationship to one another makes your brain think, I think, a little bit more.
Otherwise, I want to know down in the comments what you guys think of this camera or of half-frame cameras in general. I know I've seen this camera pop up on YouTube quite a bit in the last year with a good variety of different people reviewing it, from professional photographers all the way down to people who are just starting getting into film photography. Because of this, I think it actually makes a really good camera for most people. With that being said, I really want to pick up a Sheikah Samurai or some more dedicated half-frame camera in the future, but really love something with a little bit more control compared to this Ektar Kodak camera. Otherwise, that's going to wrap it up for this one, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you think about these new plastic cameras. It seems like every day we're getting one from Kodak, Willem Verbeek, Moment, etc. So, otherwise, until the next one, stay safe, stay shooting, guys. Peace out.